Hello and welcome to the Silver Kings War. I'm Michael Sievers, the writer, producer, and creator of this podcast series about my father's Second World War as a B-26 bombardier. Today, we'll review the development of this series, a little bit of the history of how it all came to be, and my care and compassion for my father's story. I want to reflect on our heroic warrior. As a son who sees his father, as a writer admires the work of another writer, and following the words of a life that he never knew. You, as faithful fans, know that the Silver Kings War is a podcast series based on my father, Stanley Silverfield, and his writing, entitled Dearest Ones, throughout his World War II service in the Army Air Corps from January of 1943 to October of 1945. Following Stanley through his war in the most personal first-person account has been a privilege and a wonderful decade of searching for answers and information and learning more about my father as a young man. And as his son, I built the arc of his war through tragedy and triumph. I wrote fiction based on true events, the king's day-to-day and conversion from cadet to veteran warrior. The Silver Kings War followed a young man, age 19, who rode a train from Birmingham, Alabama to Nashville, Tennessee on January 10, 1943. An air cadet, he rose from pilot school washout to decorated bombardier navigator for the Army of the United States. And Stanley, as a Marauder man, trained in the famed context of being a bombardier. Stanley rode in the greenhouse of the B-26. As I spent a decade learning about the King's War and his plane, I searched for a link to connect Stanley with Glenn L. Martin, the man who made the B-26, and that link led to a fictional post-war life for my dad. In his version, in real life, he came home, moved to Chicago, met and married my mom, Shirley June Gordon, and raised two children, my sister Cindy and me, as a hard-working salesman for Bailey's Beauty Supplies in Chicago, Illinois. I built a different post-war story for the king. In my story, he returned to college, became an aeronautical engineer, went to work for Glenn Martin, and became the first CEO of Lockheed Martin. He moved to California in 1956 and never married. Like veterans from every war, Stanley was ready to live and forego finishing an education that would lead to a different future. But I wrote my dad's finish as a man who, through intellect and personality, boxed at his weight. Many men never did. I hope that the Silver Kings War has revealed Stanley's life as a young warrior who evolved into a mature man. His life, as yours and mine, was a journey of discovery and development. Our hero, the Silver King, discovered that he had talent that many men didn't. He was focused, and in the early classes that were trained as both bombardiers and navigators, he excelled and proved to be a remarkable and competent professional. John Steinbeck, who was a world-renowned writer and, of course, wrote The Grapes of Wrath, also wrote a book called Bombs Away, which is the story of a bomber team for the United States Army Air Forces that was first published in 1942 by Paragon House. And it continues as a copyright in 1970 by Elaine, Tom, and John Steinbeck IV. And this allows for quotations from a brief passage. And it begins, in the preface and conclusion in this book. A book should have a dedication, I suppose, but this book is a dedication. It is a dedication to the men who have gone through the hard and rigid training of members of a bomber crew and who have gone away to defend the nation. And of course, the king did go away, and he lived, and he came home, which is why I'm telling you this story today. And Steinbeck concluded, lastly, the title Bombs Away is taken from the call of the bombardier when the great bombs fall free from the racks and curve down toward the enemy. The bombardier in the transparent nose of the ship lifts his microphone and his voice goes into the ears of every member of the crew, and he calls, "Bombs away." That means the mission is completed. That means it is time to go home. Someday, the call will ring above a broken enemy, and then it will be time to go home for good. And you are listening to the Silver King's War.